Mental Health First Aid England is enormously pleased to be and thrilled to be working with the conference firstly to present this event, but also to ensure that we have mental health first aid support over the 4 days of the conference. The theme of this this morning's session is 99 billion pound problems, the mental health and the UK economy. That arises because nearly 2 years ago the government commissioned a report from Paul Farmer and Sir Dennis Stevenson, and that, when it was published, identified the cost to the UK economy was 99 billion pounds of mental health at work. It was some 99 billion pounds a year, with 300,000 people falling out of work every year because of it. What we're hoping to do with this session is explore with you, the audience, and our extraordinarily brilliant panel, how we can possibly address the drain this represents on the UK economy. But you really don't want to hear from me, because instead we have an amazing and distinguished and extraordinarily lovely panel. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and say a little bit, first of all, about how they have an interest in mental health. And I would turn to to my immediate right, to a man who needs no introduction, but I'm sure he'll do brilliantly when he...
Thank you very much, Mark. So I'm Tom, for those who don't know me, Tom Brake, Member of Parliament for Carshalton, Wallington. And I suppose I'm here partly because the real experts that we have within the party, like Paul Burstow and Norman Lamb, aren't here, but also because I suppose as a Member of Parliament I am an employer and have been for 22 years, and during that time I have had experience of one particular member of staff who has very significant mental health issues, who joined, and she won't mind me saying this because she's very open about it, who joined as a volunteer, and over probably a 5-year period she got from being a volunteer who was able to come in a day or so a week up to a full-time employee. Unfortunately, soon after the last general election and some things that were happening locally in terms of changes to the waste collection service, which generated such a large volume of complaints that all seemed to arrive at me, although I'm not personally responsible for waste collection. She unfortunately has not been back to work since, and we're trying to... She's going through a programme which hopefully at the end of that she will be able to come back to work. But so I've had sort of first-hand experience of supporting someone and getting her into a working position, and I hope that I'll be able to do that again.
Caroline.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Hounsell. I am a founding member of Mental Health First Aid England, which was set up originally in 2007. I'm a psychotherapist. I am a health advocate because I've moved away from saying mental health, because I don't really want to separate mental and physical health, they're one and the same. You know, kind of why I'm here, everybody always says, oh, how did you get into mental health? And I have to say I was born into it. I was a carer for my mum with quite severe mental health issues, but I didn't realise I was a carer until I was 35, because it was my norm, it was my life. Yeah. But what I knew about my mum, for example, was that she was a very successful businesswoman, but she was also someone really crippled with depression, anxiety and suicide attempts. So she used to put this mask on for work, and she used to hide the fact back then that she was a mother and that she had mental health issues. So she was so ashamed of it. And she's still ashamed of it, and her mental health is still very, very up and down. And so, you know, how do we challenge that self-stigma that people often feel ashamed of? How do we challenge the culture, an environment that we live in where it's still not okay for us not to be okay? You know, I have an ambition in this world that mental health is deemed in the same light as physical health issues, and that two should not be separated, they're one the same. And so today's discussion is going to be really interesting, both to hear from you and to talk about kind of what your experiences are, but to ask questions, and we can have a healthy discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alison.
I'm impressed with my first two comments. I can't speak without my notes. That's the way my mind works. So apologies for that. But I can't actually remember my own story. It just shows how all our minds work differently. So my journey into first of all, who I am. So I work for WHSmith and I head up the strategic projects team. So I don't even really need to know what that is. Not really directly related to mental health, but if I just explain to you why I'm here and why mental health is really important to me. So my journey into mental and physical health equality started with the death of a friend and colleague. It was this horribly final event that made me realise that I had managed to go through school, university, and working for highly respected employers without having much of a clue about how to look after my own mind or be aware of how to look out for the mental health of my colleagues. I started with the realisation that I needed to get myself a mental health education, but quickly saw that this was something that is shared. Just as we have to ensure that our workplace is physically safe, so we have to make sure that we have the right support for mental health. Working out what to do and how was a challenge for me, but now resources such as Mind and Heads Together's Mental Health at Work website gives access to hundreds of resources in a truly manageable way. So I started with two objectives that I thought we needed to do: to raise mental health awareness and reduce stigma, and to provide support through training. And I'm guessing some questions might come up on that. These objectives are serving us well, but as soon as we started delivering mental health first aid training, it became clear there was a third objective missing. While we're working on awareness raising, stigma reduction and support through training, we also need to understand which elements of our culture are driving mentally healthy behaviours and what we need to change. We're still in the relatively early stages of this work on changing our culture. It's the hardest objective by a long way, but it's also the one that's likely to drive most benefit. So how are we going about meeting all three of our objectives? For awareness raising and stigma reduction, Time to Change have a wealth of materials which we've used, from video workshops to conversation starters, as well as their fantastic tools to enable employers to come up with a plan to end mental health discrimination. We've paired this up with work with mental health charities, including Mind, Place to Be, Calm and MQ. And the charity work gives us an opportunity to use resources from the charities, but also to fundraise for them. Events such as Children's Mental Health Week in February each year allow us to get involved in making sure that no children of today are as ignorant as I was. Working with organisations such as MQ enables us to give employees the opportunity to take part in research and learn from it, as well as to fundraise to enable MQ to do more research. In terms of support through training, in line with most employers, we had a lot of catching up to do. Whereas physical health training is common, mental health training is still relatively rare. For us, matching the number of mental and physical health first aiders was a great place to start, along with ensuring that all of our line managers have a compulsory half-day course to enable them to be mental health aware. We want all of our managers to be equipped to start a conversation with their team and guide them to appropriate support. The results from our recent employee engagement survey show that training is making a difference, with managers feeling more confident to start a conversation and employees feeling significantly more confident than average to speak with their manager if they're concerned about their mental health. The cultural change objective is more of a challenge. There is no neat answer to this one, but it's definitely not rocket science. Generally, we know the right thing to do, but for many reasons, we don't always prioritise what's most likely to enable ourselves and our teams to flourish. We're currently working on getting our senior leaders in the business to better understand the impact of their behaviours, both on themselves and on their teams. The early response to this is incredibly encouraging, but I know we've got a long way to go. We've already seen some amazing reductions in stigma and improvements in help-seeking behaviour at WHSmith as a result of the work that we've undertaken. But not all organisations have got the same combination of an individual's drive for change and sponsorship to enable change to be progressed. If we want fundamental widespread change, we need mental and physical health to be equal in the workplace, starting with equal first aid support being mandated.
Kirsten, your moment has come.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me, Mark. My name's Kirsten Johnson, and I'm the Prospective Parliamentary candidate for North Devon, which is a traditional Liberal seat. It was Jeremy Thorpe's seat back in the day. I still have constituents who tell me stories of Jeremy and his family. And then Nick Harvey's seat, who's now our CEO of the National Party. However, I'd like to just tell you why I got into politics, because I'm a pianist and a musician and not a career politician. It was because of mental health. I was part of a voluntary group, a church where I lived at the time, who was visiting people experiencing mental ill health who were in secure units in hospital. And I started doing that in 2007, visiting different people. And there was one particular woman I was visiting that really changed the course of my career, because she was a cellist who'd been gifted as a teenager, went to Wells Cathedral School, the Manchester College of Music, was slated for a brilliant performing career and had done concerto with orchestra, but had consistently experienced mental health since the age of 13 and had not gotten proper treatment. And because of that, at the age of, I think it was 45 when I first started visiting her, was still being repeatedly sectioned and then sent into the community, and then sectioned and sent into the community. And it struck home to me that here I was as a pianist, having had a fantastic career, loads of opportunities, because I'd had the support around me I needed when I struggled in my career, and she hadn't, and it just wasn't fair. And it just was my tipping point, and I thought, you know, I'm going to do something politically to try to make it more fair for people experiencing mental ill health. As a second part of that voluntary commitment, we were offered training in mental health first aid. And I have to admit, when I was first offered that, I thought, I don't need that. I've been visiting hospitals for the last 7 years. I know everything there is to know about it. I probably know more than somebody could teach me about it, because I've seen people at their worst. But I went along, I was game, and it was fantastic. It was a really, really good course. I liked the way it brought everybody around the table and the discussions that ensued, because we all have different life experiences. Destigmatizing mental health, as Alison mentioned, is a big part of the course, but it's also learning our limits, what we can do and what we can't do. When do we need to get the professionals involved? I was really impressed with the course. And at that stage, I put myself forward to become an approved parliamentary candidate. So what do approved parliamentary candidates do but try to get themselves on stage at Liberal Democrat conferences? So I put in an amendment to our mental health policy, which was being debated in Liverpool in 2015. Norman Lamb had written with his team, a fantastic mental health policy, which was adopted. But it didn't mention mental health first aid. So I put in an amendment, and I thought I'd just read out the amendment, because I was quite chuffed. It says to consult with external bodies on the content of and how best to include training in mental health first aid with a view to incorporating elements of mental health first aid into existing first aid at work courses. Well, it was adopted without even debate. So it's in our policy. We as a party are completely behind mental health first aid. So after that, I thought, right, I've launched my political career, what's next? Norman Lamb, the fantastic person he is, invited me into his offices at Westminster, and we brainstormed about what was the way forward. And that led to Norman and colleagues launching an early day motion in October 2016 that would incorporate mental health first aid into existing first aid at work legislation. And I am going to be tedious and read this out, because I think it is the way forward with policy, as we're discussing policy today. So Norman tabled a motion that reads, and if you want to look it up, it's Early Day Motion 505 on the Parliamentary website, that this House notes with concern that the current first aid legislation fails to make adequate provision for mental ill health. It further notes that the Health and Safety First Aid Regulations 1981 neglect the mental health of employees, and that the examples of health problems requiring first aid in the Health and Safety Executive's guidance on the regulations relate exclusively to physical health. It acknowledges that the Management of Health and Safety Work Regulations 1999 refer to the risk of stress-related ill health amongst work activities, but that this does not address mental health issues caused by factors outside of work and which may nevertheless affect health and well-being in the workplace. It recognizes that only 43% of people with mental health problems are actually in employment, and compared to 74% of the general population. And that 65% of people with other health conditions, with the cost of mental illness to the economy at an estimate of $105 billion annually. This House believes that addressing mental health more effectively in the workplace, in order to help people recover and avoid people falling out of work, must be a key public policy objective, and therefore urges government to commit to the principle of equality for mental health in the workplace by amending first aid regulations and guidance to require every organization to have trained mental health first aiders and to ensure employees are aware that their first aid obligations relate both to physical and mental health issues. So that has been tabled. Now, further on from that, there's been lots of cross-party discussions, and I'm actually a firm believer in working cross-party on issues such as this. And it's one thing I think Norma Lamb has done really, really well, is in talking to his colleagues across the board about how to get this enacted. There was a backbench debate, wasn't there, in January this year, and it was fantastic to hear that, and that it's being taken forward. So it's not yet law, but the right things are happening, and if you can get me elected, I'll try to make it law. So that's one of my goals. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from us. Would you like to ask any questions?
Yeah.
If everybody's being... you next and you first. There.
I've got two things in my head. If I can do both of them, please.
Please.
Okay. One is probably you'll all be aware of it, but it's been going on forever because I've been in the health service for 30-40 years. Is the lack of communication between acute services and community services. And as an example, only this week we've got a colleague who's very extreme alcoholism, in and out of hospital continually. We had all the community services set up. She was still in hospital, so they decided that she still should be under acute services. She came out, she obviously wasn't going to cope. So now she's back in again, and she's getting referred to community. And it's just ridiculous, the cost and the stress and the trauma that it causes. And all they have to do is the social services department have to talk to each other. It really is nothing. She was sent home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that was just last week. But I mean, those stories go on forever. So that's one thing. The other thing, my career has mainly been in learning disabilities and autism, more recently autism, higher function Asperger type people. And I was telling one of your young man over there actually, hello, yesterday about this. I don't know if it's relevant to mental health services, but with autism, you know, they really, really push, the NAS really, really push and got the autism strategy and the autism law. And they've done so much good work. But it wasn't actually part of the law, but one of the things the NAS do is the Autism Friendly Awards, that the employers can, or and not just employers, or any organisation, small or large, whatever, they can say, can we be assessed for being autism friendly? And it's a very supportive process. So you come in and they'll check you against various things, and you could be really good and a few things to tweak. You could be really poor, but you've got goodwill, and they'll support you, and eventually you may hopefully get your Autism Friendly Award that you can put on as an official logo. And I just wondered if that's one way forward for mental health. I'm not quite sure how it would work, but to be getting a mental health friendly logo that could be official, because it would give those organisations a lot of support and training and all the rest of it. One of it would be requirement, not just law, but the requirement. They have this training in place. And it doesn't mean it's all perfect, but it does mean a lot of support and a lot of training, and that journey is important. Those people won't forget that journey, even if it all goes a bit pear-shaped afterwards, you know. So that's what I wanted to say. That I just wondered, that autism-friendly thing award is so significant and important. It's made such a change. So there we are.
Do you want to take that now, ladies and gentlemen? Yes.
So just briefly on both issues. So first of all, I think clearly there is an issue in terms of effective communications between health and social care. My local authority, Sutton, is sort of merging the two to try to ensure that that those boundaries in effect don't exist. And of course, when you sort of achieve that merger, the other thing that you have is that you don't have the battle about who's going to pay for it, because the budgets are merged, and therefore there's no argument, no cost shunting, or no purpose in cost shunting from one organisation to the other. So I think that can be effective, but clearly it's not working effectively at present. I was travelling on the train yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and someone sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, I've just been released from hospital, I've been released to nowhere. I've been told to go back to a place where, a house where the owner had severe alcohol and drugs problems. There are lots of people coming in on drugs into the property, but that is what had happened. That person being released with no money and told to go back to the person they've been staying, or back to the person they've been staying with. So that clearly isn't working effectively at present. And just on the autism-friendly issue, I'm pleased to say that I think it was Cheryl Gillen, the Conservative Member of Parliament, who's been pushing autism for a number of years, or ways of addressing autism or highlighting the issue of autism. And she did organise an autism-friendly training session in Parliament, which I attended, along with quite a large number of other MPs. And that was certainly useful in terms of giving us a better understanding of the sorts of things that we need to be aware of. And that sort of immediately fed through into other aspects of parliamentary business, in that I speak for the House Commons Commission. So the House Commons Commission is the body that in effect manages the House of Commons. And one of the things that we are looking at is in the restoration and renewal project. So this is the £5 billion worth of taxpayers' money that we're going to spend on making sure that the Palace of Westminster doesn't burn down. One of the things that we're looking at is making sure that in that new sort of refurbished palace, that for people with autism, there will be some challenges. Simply replicating the existing decor, for instance, which is very much in your face, and very bright, lots of different colours, often clashing, but we have to be aware of that in terms of autism. So certainly I recommend that, and if similar courses can be provided for mental health more generally, then I think that would be a huge benefit.
I think Kirsten beat you to slight suggestion.
I'm really pleased to raise autism. One of the other hats I have is I'm the chair of a national charity called the Fragile X Society. Fragile X is a genetic condition. It's inherited, but many children or young adults with Fragile X also have a dual autism diagnosis. So I know quite a lot about this. Because until we truly integrate physical and mental health services, we don't actually help people with autism or Fragile X. Fragile X is genetic, so you see a geneticist, but in girls that have Fragile X, they have extreme anxiety. So you see your CAM, psychiatric side of the team. And there's the physical issues of heart murmurs and such, but there's also the mental health issues. And we need to get joined up strategy in place so that we're seeing the whole person. And I was talking to Norman Lamb about this recently, actually, that a lot of health conditions do have that dual diagnosis, that people who are diagnosed with cancer often have mental health conditions or depression and other anxieties that might be related to that. So we do need to integrate our services a bit more, and I just wanted to make that point in relation to autism.
Is it better to stand up?
Yeah.
I mean, your first point around integration, I don't know whether it's a human thing, but we all like to kind of keep things in our own little silos, and my experience is lots and lots of work around, trying to integrate and share. But often what people do are very protective of the work they do, and often there's something about the culture of also kind of dissing other services and thinking that our service is the best service. And actually, I often think, what is that about? Is that about kind of, I don't know, not connecting with other people, maybe kind of being quite precious about what you do? And I think I think it's a human thing. I think it's, and I think I was thinking about one way around it was like, actually get a load of people that represent those different services together, get them in the room, get them to talk about their day-to-day job, and get them to identify what are the barriers that get in the way of us genuinely putting the person at the heart of what we do, and actually collectively coming up with a bit of a plan. And it might be that they do virtual meetings, but there's something about being really honest about that, because I think it's a human thing. And the other part around you're kind of liking it to the kind of autism-friendly badge. My sense of what you're saying is, can we do something around like that for mental health? And that actually we have some sort of guideline that says, do you know what, we're mental health friendly here, and that we embrace that and we acknowledge that and we protect that and we promote that within our organisations. And I think that's really, really important, because there is no health without mental health. You can't separate it. You know, you can't be, you know, a productive employer or employee if you have really debilitating mental health issues. So I think we've got a long way to go before we start to see a difference, and we need patience in this. And I think, you know, I've done a lot of work overseas, for example, in Uganda and Tanzania, and they can only dream about being where we are. So we also need to have perspective and realise and be thankful of how far we've come, and the fact that we're sitting in a room now talking about this at the Liberal Democrats annual conference means that we've achieved quite a lot. But we also need to be very hopeful, I think, about where we want to go.
I'm going to ask this lady next, and then you, sir.
I came along because I knew I needed to know more about the subject. I've never heard the term mental health first aid. Can you briefly tell me what happens, and if I wanted, I'm a qualified physical first aider, if I wanted to be a qualified mental health first aider, what would I be trained in?
I will defer to Caroline if need be, but so it's basically, it's a 2-day course to be fully qualified. There are different courses, so for example there's a half-day course if you just want to become aware, but if you want to have the same qualification as you do, or similar qualifications you do for your physical health first aid, it's a 2-day course. MHFA England have got a website, you can go on and find out about courses in your area. There are various different instructors around the country. We deliver in-house in WHSmith. You have to be an accredited instructor to deliver. And the course basically is, you know, it's kind of my dream of the equality for physical and mental health. It teaches you, so for people like me who are so ignorant, it teaches you the real basics about different mental illnesses that people might experience. It teaches you about things like stigma and the impact of stigma. I'm really pleased to hear that even for people who knew a lot about mental health, they still find it valuable. And I would reiterate that feedback comes from delegates really strongly. But one of the most important things is nothing like to the degree someone like Caroline will have, but you start to learn about listening skills and about how to guide people to appropriate supports. In the same way as you wouldn't expect a physical health first aider to, if someone fainted, you don't expect them to start trying to work out how to diagnose why they fainted. You just expect to make them comfortable. If they need professional help, to get them to it. It is the mental health equivalent. And just coming back to the point about mental health friendly, I would love us to get to the point where we don't need that badge. For things like autism friendly, dementia friendly, that I really appreciate. They're very kind of specialist areas. But I'd love us all just to have that base level of education, and that's what mental health first aid does.
Sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Ashley Rowlands. Firstly, thank you very much indeed for stating the expenditure. I'm Deputy Leader of St Albans Council, and I'm also the Mental Health Champion. Two questions, one probably to you, sir, which is your suggestion. I think councillors, the elected council, I guess there may be quite a few in the room, need to attend these training courses, insofar as we need to look after ourselves, but we also are technically employers, and we have a lot of interaction with employees on the council, and I think many of us have a lot to learn. So I'm interested to know whether you've made any initiatives, e.g. through the LGA, to try and promote this. Second question, probably to Alison. I mean, the other part of supporting employers is, or employees rather, and employers, is when people return to work. And I wonder what, from your company's experience, you found are the most useful things to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So far, 20,000 employers presently offer a mental health first aid training to their staff. Certainly, the civil service have adopted it, and I know certain members of the Greater London Council have. So St Albans looks like a place we need.
Well, one of the reasons I asked the question was that I actually organised to have it put on for the councillors one evening, and a third of them turned up.
Yes.
In other words, there is, I think, a recognised need.
Yes. No, I think you're right. And working with everybody is a key thing to try and get this achieved.
On the return to that, that's a really great question, and the thing I love is that there is a free resource. It's on the MHFA website, which is called the Line Manager Resource. You can get a PDF of it, and we use that in our mental health training, and it basically gives you all of those guidelines. And it's really, it comes back again to, I knew before I started this work that if one of my team had a heart attack or one of my colleagues has just had a kidney transplant, I know that she's not going to be able to come straight back to work full time. I know she's going to need a significant amount of time off work. I don't know exactly how much though. The medical professionals tell me that, and then her personal situation dictates what she can cope with to make sure she functions effectively. It's no different. We need the medical professionals to guide us, and we need to take account of the individual within that medical guidance. But that line manager resource is a brilliant place to start.
I'm going to ask this lady there, and why don't you
More of a comment going back to the start of the discussion. It's really important not just that NHS and local authorities work together, but that you have the third sector working in there, because that's really important. I mean, I spent 2 years working with 6 GP practices on modernising primary care and introducing them to what's on their doorstep. And it's not about them holding back what they believe, it's they don't have the time to learn everything else that's going on there until you let them see that by learning what's out there to help people's mental health as well as their physical health, that actually it saves them time. And in Scotland we already have health and social care partnerships, but until they fully include the third sector in there, I've managed mental health link workers for the last 2 years across the local authority area. It's really important. It's also important we make sure that when there's support services, whatever they are, in place to help people with mental health, that they're allowed to take as long as the person needs to get them back either into work or back to the job they've already got. Because too many times funders say, oh, you can work with somebody for up to 4 months. Well, if someone has a serious mental health issue, or someone who takes a little bit of time to accept they've got a mental health problem, it'll take a lot longer than 4 months. You may not need to see them very often, working in the third sector with them, but you do need to have the time to do it.
Yeah.
Often up to 18 months to 2 years.
I would take you first, and then you, madam.
Thank you. I'm Chris from Croydon. I have personal experience of mental health services in Croydon. I was a carer for my wife from 2007 for 6 years. And basically there's a complete crisis in the provision of mental health services in Croydon. It's part of the South London and Maudsley Trust, I think across the Trust, but particularly in Croydon, because I've seen the contrast between the services that are available now and the services that were available when my wife was diagnosed in hospital. And if that had happened to her now, there'd be no chance of her getting back to work, which she has done. And we have friends who can't see a member of the crisis team when they've actually tried to kill themselves. The only resource that are left to them is to phone emergency services. And actually, the ambulance that my friend got, the people said 50% pulled the call-outs to ambulances employed in mental health related issues, because that's the only resource left. So I think we really need to commit to properly funding mental health services, and it is terrible. It's been decimated in the last 10 years. We had 3 or 4 places, resource places. We had teams, you had a dedicated CPN. Now you can't see a CPN if your life depends on it. So this crisis has been kind of swept under the carpet, and I think we need to address the issue of proper funding and, you know, proper organised resources, because they're just not there anymore. It's really awful, because people's lives are just going to nothing, and, you know, we've got to sort this out.
So what I'm going to do is wrap this up with the next question, which is the lady over there.
So, Queensland Ambulance Services is a governor of SLAM, and I totally echo what you say. We're absolutely struggling, and there's promise of more funding, but it's not there yet. I just wanted to make an offer, I guess. So my name is Catherine Grant, and I'm a party member in Lambeth, but I'm also a mental health first aid instructor, and have been for several years. And I'm an associate instructor with MHFA England, which means I mainly work with corporates and workplaces. But when I was standing for council a year and a half ago, I recognised how stressful being a council candidate was, being a volunteer, being in an area where you know, you've got no counsellors. It's really stressful and hard work. And I let my mental health slip again. I have bipolar disorder and I have a history of psychosis. And I recognised at that point that actually the party could do with a bit of mental health first aid training, and at the time I offered some. I can't remember who I spoke to at party HQ, and nobody got back to me. And what I'd say is I would be very happy to put on as many courses as the party needs at cost price, so the price of the manuals. Yeah, and if the party could provide a meeting room and some refreshments, I would do it, and I would do it repeatedly, because you know, that's what I love to do. So, let me know. I don't know if MHFA is going to put a sign up.
The panel are gagging to answer.
That's brilliant, by the way. Well done. I think that's really generous of you. Thank you for being so generous. It's in response to this kind of funding issue. It's like a perfect storm, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's been not a priority for quite a long time.
Let's cross you again. I don't have
Thank you, that's fine. It's not a priority. It hasn't been a priority. It's becoming a priority. We know that too little has been invested for too long, and I think the other issue is that things don't get ring-fenced. So when there is an injection of cash, often it's poured into other acute services, and kind of the money is lost a little bit, I think. There is promise, I understand, of a whole new lot of funding, but it's going to probably take time to filter through, and it is going to be ring-fenced. That's my understanding of it. So there's something about reacting, I think, appropriately to the huge wave of increased mental health issues and people needing support, okay? But there's also another angle which I'm really passionate about, which is this whole preventative angle around we can't possibly keep affording to react all the time. It's not good for us financially and health-wise. So mental health first aid is about this kind of preventative agenda, which is around, you know, let's get us to a place where we know what we don't know about mental health. So we all take responsibility to look after our own mental health. We move right upstream. We understand the risk factors and the protective factors. We go right into schools, let's say, early ages, and we teach the next generation around everything that they need to know to maintain wellness for thriving life. We make it a priority in every policy and practice, because there is no health without mental health. And actually, you know, no one's immune to having mental health issues, that's for sure, just like physical health issues. So if we skill ourselves all up and we take responsibility for ourselves to maintain wellness, great, but then some of us are going to become unwell, right? And it's for ourselves and those people around us to give us support early enough, because the earlier we get help and treatment, the better the recovery. So there's something about the preventative angle, and there's something about properly investing in our referral pathways. And what I said earlier is getting our referral pathways to integrate and support each other and to talk. And there's a huge time issue, which is just been over. But there's also something about understanding different cultures and communities and, you know, workplaces, because they're quite diverse, and they're not one size fits all.
I was going to ask that lady there, the gentleman behind immediately afterwards.
Okay, and Jenny Ferguson and Kings. Thank you for what you just said, because I was going to ask, what are you doing about getting mental wellness into schools? Is there a standard syllabus for mental wellness training, the same as there is for first aid training?
So we need to answer that.
And secondly, is there any geographical data on how many employers have taken up mental first aid training? Are there any figures that I can publish to say in our council area we've got 10,000 employers, but only 6 of them have taken up mental health first aid training?
The answer is, I think the answer is yes, because I've seen a pictogram.
Would you put that in whatever
pictogram.
comes round afterwards? And,
Yes.
and are we going to get a handout for this that has some of the resources that you're talking about?
Really
useful.
We've just published something on it. So it is available, and because I just got my copy.
Who's we? Who is we?
So if you check out
MHFA.
the
MHFA.
Still coming.
Us. Mental Health First Aid England.
So if you check out mhfaengland.org, we've got a whole plethora of different toolkits and information in there, and also information about where you can find courses and stuff like that. But going back to your point about going right into schools, I mean, I headed up the mental health first aid in every secondary school. We also connected to primary schools, and what I would say is that I've got a background in education. That's where I started, actually. That's my passion, actually, youth. And what I would say is that there's so many variable entities in schools. There's some, because traditionally PSHE has not been mandatory, it's also really variable. So in some schools you've got this really enlightened, progressive mental health structure that goes right into primary schools. Others, they barely touch on it. So there's something about standardising that, but Ofsted has started to assess the wellbeing now, in the last year or two. What I would say is, in schools, there's an issue around staff mental health, because we know that it's on the floor, it's in a really difficult place, and there's also something about the young people's mental health. Mental health issues are happening and occurring younger, and they are a little bit more prevalent. We've also got the kind of caregivers and teachers' mental health, and what we would say, just like with the employers, is it needs to be a whole system approach. So just throwing in a mental health first aid course is the beginning, but you've got to have a whole structure around it. It's not the magic, and it's just like the one-off wellbeing day is not going to work. Within schools, you need to think about fabric, just like organisations. Is it in your policies, in your processes? Do you have what your referral pathway is like? Have you got counsellors available? Are you getting supervision for those people that are helping people? Because actually, it's quite a lot of stress, isn't it, to help support someone? Are you supporting the supporters? Are you in schools, for example, you can train in adult mental health first aid for the adults so they can support each other and their colleagues, but then there's also a youth mental health first aid course which is designed specifically for people to help young people, because adolescence kicks in from about 8 or 9 for some of those, you see, and so we've got this huge spike in dopamine which is disproportionate to our serotonin levels. So it's the commonest time when mental health, 3/4 of mental health conditions present themselves before the age of 24. So it's like a golden opportunity, isn't it? If we're going to go right upstream, let's support our young people, as much as we can. Let's invest in that, because then we are going to make huge headway if we really look at this three-dimensionally.
Tom,
Just and I apologise, I'm going to have to go off to our Parliamentary Party meeting, so where we make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row for the rest of today. Just on the mental health issue for young people, I'm certainly aware that in the last probably 4 or 5 years, every time I go into a school where they're doing a presentation about an issue that's of concern to them, I've been shocked about the number of presentations in all of the schools that I go to that are around the issue of mental health amongst young people. So it really is I'm not sure whether clearly there's a greater awareness of the issue, but there also does seem to be a bigger and increasing challenge. Although I must say recently, particularly in the schools that are closer to Croydon, they're now doing presentations around the risks of knife crime, given the risk of knife crime in Croydon. So there is that presence in schools, and I think that's why, I'm sure others will have mentioned parity of esteem. I think that's why people like Paul Burstow and Norman Lamb pressed as hard as they did to try to secure parity of esteem so that those young people get access to treatment as quickly as possible, rather than simply being told that there's a 3-month wait, because I think, as a number of other speakers have said, early intervention, just as with physical health, early intervention helps a proper recovery, and reduces the risk. So I'm sorry I'm going to have to leave you, but thank you very much for coming to our
Thank you.
conference.
Thank you. Sir.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a psychotherapist in South London, and I work in integrating physical and mental health care. And there are lots of very exciting things we can do in that space. One of the biggest obstacles I find in my work is the target culture within the NHS, by which services are increasingly under pressure to deliver to centralised targets, which in theory sound very, very good. Targets to increase access, targets to reduce depression and anxiety. The problem, as I see it, is that human lives are far too complex to measure in this way. And I'm on a weekly basis confronted with making decisions with patients I support which are humanly and clinically the right thing to do, and from an overall system perspective will ultimately reduce costs because it's more sensible to take care of this particular need, but it doesn't fall into a target box that we're commissioned for, and that time and effort is basically invisible, and I'm actively disincentivized from doing that, from taking the holistic wider picture, because it doesn't fit into the targets. It seems to me the solution is not likely to be to try to design different targets which are more holistic, like a target to be holistic, because the complexity is such that it's just not amenable to measurement. There is a trend towards performance-related pay in the health service, which is payment by results. I think it's going to be extremely destructive to organisations working together and liaising, because that takes tremendous time and effort to liaise effectively, and the drive to make it more efficient in a way cuts against what is often most human. And I'd like your perspective as we try and look at sort of large-scale organisation. Targets is one tool that's often used to drive change. I don't think it works well in this context, but I'm not sure the other pathway to do it, and I'd love your views.
Who would like to take that?
I mean, I'm thinking I'm talking, I'm really mindful.
You probably warned him. I mean, I can just very briefly say, because I'm not an expert in targets, but I personally think we need person-centered care, and I don't think the target system works anyway. So I would like to see just a complete change in our culture and how we actually treat people. That it needs to be integrated physical and mental health, it needs to be integrated health and social care, and it needs to be about the person and well-being, and creating the best society for all of us to live in. That vulnerable people just aren't getting the proper care that they should be getting. So thank you for your insight on that. I'd have to look into specifically how to do that with legislation, because I haven't done. But yes, I agree with you. Since I have the chance to make a couple of remarks, because we're running short on time, can I follow up on the preventative angle, which you spoke very eloquently of, Caroline? It goes back to my friend who at the age of 13 was diagnosed as a cellist, and then has cost the NHS and social care millions and millions of pounds. Now, I believe in the person, and I think it should be person-centered care, but there is the economic cost as well. If we put preventative care in properly, we are going to save loads of money that then we can invest in preventative care. It's just not joined up. I'm a mother of 3 teenagers, and my youngest very sadly lost a friend to suicide this year, a 13-year-old lad that she played tennis with. Because of my mental health first aid training, which I then bring into my family life as well, which is the other cross-purpose of mental health training, is that we take it into our personal lives, I was able to pick up early signs. We could see her spiraling down. You know, she was a very fit, active girl who all of a sudden wasn't sleeping at night and was exhibiting lots of other signs. And we put early intervention in place immediately. You know, we just paid for counseling, we paid for her to have some talking therapy. And she's okay, thank God, now. It was a horrific time to go through as a parent, but we knew what to do. And I think about all those people up and down the country who just don't know what to do. And getting back to this lady's question in the front row, you know, what is the benefit of mental health first aid? From my point of view, the benefit is that people will get involved. If you don't know anything about it, you just don't want to get involved. If you see somebody with a psychotic episode, you cross to the other side of the road. Not that we don't want to, but people don't have the tools to. They don't want to do the wrong thing, and they're just scared and nervous about the situation. So I think one of the basic tools of mental health first aid is equipping us just to get involved, to be brave enough to come alongside a person, to know when it needs to be the crisis team phone, to know when it's actually just a panic attack we can help with, give them a cup of tea and calm the breathing, or when it's something, you know, to call the GP. It gives us those tools where we actually do something. So I couldn't recommend it enough from that point of view. And I think that's probably all I'll say, because there's a room full of people wanting to ask questions.
I've had the nudge. So I'm just one last question, sir. Because I've seen your finger go.
I just want to make the point and so on that every council has a health and wellbeing board, That's a system leader that tries to actually break down the silage between community and acute care. If there are problems, that's the body which is aggressive, and certainly work with pressing and preventative and early intervention methods and so on. And every health and wellbeing board has endorsed a health and care plan, and I'm sure a lot of that will actually be centred on mental health. But I certainly want to take away from today the opportunity to actually encourage our businesses, but first of all, actually encourage all our council officers to actually undergo some mental health training. So I shall look forward to using the toolkit. Thank you very much.
Alison, do you want to?
I've got one little phrase that I use which fits with something that Caroline said as well, which is I want us to be ambitious but patient. And that's the mantra that I use. There's so much I want to see. There's so much we can do in lots of little steps. We need to be patient. It is going to take time, but we'll do it.
Caroline, do you want to have your closing remark?
God, there's a pressure. I just think that this mental health first aid movement, okay, it's about values, it's about practical skills, and that actually, genuinely, you know, each one of you has got up here early to have a conversation about mental health, and it's really close to my heart, and I can see it's really close to your heart. Let's fight together. Let's not give up. Let's hold the hope. You know, it's really easy. I mean, I'm a psychotherapist. You know, I listen all day long to hopelessness, and sometimes I have to hold the hope. Yeah, and actually, no matter how bleak it gets, we have to hold that hope that things are going to get better. So that's kind of the final thing that I want to say, is that don't lose sight of that. Because if someone you're supporting in front of you feels like they're hopeless, you might just have to hold that until they're ready to take it again.
Kirsten, would you like, before I wrap up, would you
No, I've said it.
You've said it all. Ladies and gentlemen, I really, just to wrap up, I don't want to add to a lot that has been said, but I have a dream. And it's a dream that on a nationwide basis, that the working place mental health is promoted and protected. That is something which at the end of the day will be better for people, it'll be better for business, and it'll be better for the economy. But to achieve that, I think we have to work together, not only as individuals, as employers, as regulators, and as policy makers. It's quite clear that we have still a long way to go, but what is quite exciting is that we're on that path. And thank you so much for coming here today, and thank you so much for my enormously wonderful